This meeting is being recorded.
Fantastic. Okay, welcome everybody to November 24th, 2020 Finance and Facilities Subcommittee meeting. We're meeting remotely today. I do not have my standard verbiage, but this is allowed under the governor's rulings due to COVID. So everybody is dialed in for this particular meeting, and we're going to go through our agenda. Because we're all remote, every vote has to be by roll call. So I will do my best to get through everybody who is dialed in versus those who are not dialed in or not in attendance. So for instance, right now, I believe that Ms. Flowers is trying to get in. So I'm just going to forward her the Zoom link with the embedded password, and then we'll get going. Pivoting back to remote meetings after having been in-person meetings, I'm a little rusty, so I apologize for that. But I would love to have Ms. Flowers on the call. I thought she had a conflict. And so before we get started, I will just run through who I see dialed in already. If you'll bear with me for just a minute. All right, from the school committee, we have F&F members, Ms. Robinson, as well as Kim Coelho. And from our school district, we have a finance director, Jean Sherburne, Bethany Spolansky, special ed, Dr. Trocheck. We have Ms. Taylor, the principal at Beverly High. Running through the list. All right, my members of the public. I see right now dialed in Lindsay. I do not see my friends Mr. Manzo nor Mr. Silva. They might be coming. Also on the call right now, we have our recording secretary, Jenna. That's you, right, Jenna? Fantastic, thank you. And thanks for having your video on so I can see you. We have a guest speaker this evening, Mr. Mike Collins. Fantastic, thank you for joining us, Mr. Collins. BevCam, of course, is on here. Miss Abel, school committee president, is also on the call and recording. So she's kind of hosting this meeting for us right now, because when we finish F&F, we're going to move right into committee of the whole. So we're going to use the same exact Zoom meeting to facilitate that. All right, and city councilors Todd Rotundo and Julie Flowers are both on the call, although I don't see Julie on audio yet. I think I named everybody. Anybody else on the call who realizes if I missed anybody, speak now before we jump into the meeting. Okay, so our first order of business is to approve previous sets of meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes, we'll take them individually from September 16th. Can I have a motion to accept those meeting minutes, please?
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
Ms. Robinson, was that you?
Yes.
Okay. When I'm sharing the screen, I can't see all of you. So
it's too sour, bro. Second.
Fantastic. That I believe for Jenna's recording purposes, that was a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second from Ms. Coelho. Do we have any comments or corrections on that set of meeting minutes? All right, so, Mr. Manzo has joined us. I don't see him on audio yet, so we'll call on him last for our roll call vote. By roll call, accepting the meeting minutes from September 16th, Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
Mr. Manzo, are you on audio yet? we'll take that as he's not. So I'll call on myself. I vote yes. So that set of meeting minutes passes with a vote of 4-0, Gina. And right now we'll still record Mr. Manzo as being absent until he gets in with his audio. All right, our next set of meeting minutes is from October 21st. Can I have a motion to accept that set of meeting minutes, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. So that motion was from Ms. Coelho and a second from Ms. Robinson. Any comments or corrections on that set of meeting minutes? All right, hearing none, here comes our roll call vote. Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
Where did Mr. Manzo, are you on the call yet? All right, it would appear as if he's having some technical difficulties because now I don't even see him anymore. I'll call on myself, yes. And that's it for voting members on the call right now. So that also passes 4-0. Our next item on our agenda is a buildings and grounds report. And we are blessed to have with us today, Mr. Mike Collins, Commissioner of Public Services. Mr. Collins is going to follow up from a previous meeting and some previously posed questions about air quality. And he was also given an extra question this week about when, I'll try to pose the question correctly, when a known case happens in our schools and our maintenance staff has to go in and do a deep clean of a classroom, is the maintenance staff wearing extra PPE to do that cleaning, knowing that the room is potentially contaminated, having had a confirmed case in it? If they're wearing extra PPE, something different, more, whatever, then how are we disposing of that contaminated PPE? I believe that was the question. All right, so Mr. Collins, I'm going to, I'm going to now put myself on mute and turn the call over to you to speak to those two items.
Okay, so can I jump in first before we start with that? Because I think the first item is actually the Buildings and Grounds report from Tim. And we submitted that. I didn't know. I know that typically we just sort of review that, and if there are any questions to be asked, I'm sure Mike can help us with some of those answers if we want. But I'm wondering about on the Buildings and Grounds report covering the period of 10/21 to 11/24. If there were any questions or comments or any of those things.
Thank you, Dr. Churchick.
I'm filling in for Jean. I got to be on my game.
Oh, very, very nice. Very nice. Because clearly I'm not exactly on my game over here from home. All right. So you're absolutely right. And so does anybody have any questions about the B&G report before we go to Mr. Collins speaking on those two outstanding issues? That's fantastic. All right.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, don't be.
And so we are going to turn it over to Mike Collins. I know that he has submitted and you all have received a copy, I think, of the air quality memo that he sent with some information. And so I'm going to turn it over to him. I know originally the question was about air quality and testing and what were we doing and what might we be doing. So I'll turn it over to him.
All right, so that memo is, I cannot display the whole memo at once, but I'll just put the beginning of it up. And then Mr. Collins, if you want me to like scroll through it to show a particular part of the memo as you're speaking, please just ask me to do so.
Sure. Thanks for having me tonight. And, you know, that memo was, you asked a pretty simple question, and in this COVID world, there's no such thing as a simple answer anymore, unfortunately. So that is my, unfortunately, and I apologize, very long-winded attempt at trying to at least tell you what I know and what we collectively know right now. And, you know, like with a lot of things COVID, there's more questions than answers. But, you know, I do try to put it in the frame of the acknowledgement that to date we've been successful at preventing person-to-person transmission in the schools. So that's a huge achievement, and the credit goes to the entire team, from the school committee and the superintendent and all the administrators, the teachers, and the students for working together to make that happen. It's a huge accomplishment that is, should be celebrated. So I guess the question at hand was, are we better off adding some portable filters to the classrooms? And that's a simple enough question. And I guess the only complexity to it is, the many complexities to it is, is it something that we need to do, given the fact that we are not transmitting person to person, acknowledging the fact that winter is coming and it'll be less likely that windows will be wide open. I don't think we feel that the windows need to be wide open, even just open a crack, because really what's happening when you open the window is you're letting the exhaust fan, each classroom has its own exhaust fan, you're letting the classroom exhaust fan remove the maximum amount of air and replace it with fresh air. Because the way the systems are designed, that some of the classrooms on the elementary school level, they're designed to protect themselves from freezing. And so they'll let in as much air as they can, but if it's 5 below out, then you're gonna have an issue with the equipment that's filled with water, which is the heating coil, freezing. So it'll try to protect itself by closing off the outside air or slowing it down a little bit to make sure that we can maintain a proper discharge air temperature and not freeze the equipment. So by cracking the window a little bit or periodically, you're circumventing that and you're bringing in the maximum amount of outside air all the time. So I don't think it. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting. But there's like right now in this spot of your description, I wish to ask you, the second paragraph in your letter speaks to all the data being computed with the windows closed. So are you saying right now that when we have the windows open, the numbers are actually better?
Much better. Yes, that's why I wanted to just, just explain that what we've reported to date is sort of worst case scenario, and it's actually really good numbers. That if you closed all the windows and just operated as is, the numbers are actually very good. The overall air changes per hour are actually very good for a classroom. Again, the second place where we're conservative is when we're calculating that airflow. We know how much air is moving through the classroom, and you divide that into the volume of the classroom. We're using what we call the gross volume of the classroom, which doesn't take into account really the thickness of the walls or the furniture or the people. It would be very, very difficult to calculate that number. So because we're using a larger volume than is actually the case, it gives us, it's small, but it's a significant margin that makes our numbers even more conservative. So the windows closed number is actually better than we're reporting, but we're just, we can't, in all practicality, calculate that actual volume of the classroom. It is possible to do. It's just not practical to do for us right now. So what we've reported to you previously is a pretty conservative number for air changes per hour. Now, you can open up the windows or crack the windows even. It doesn't have to be much. Even an inch will do. And you've dramatically altered the amount of air coming into the classroom and provided a significant benefit to the classroom. So, that's, our first line of defense, masks, masks, masks. Always wear masks. Everyone has been doing that. The students and staff have been excellent about that without fail. And that is the core principle of how we're going to protect ourselves and each other from the virus. The ventilation is really a distant second to wearing a mask. But we have excellent ventilation with the windows closed, and any bit we can open the windows. And that's why I got into a little bit about if it's so cold that you can't open the windows or leave them open, because there's going to be those kind of days, then maybe It's opening the window between classes when the kids take a break, open a window, let the air in the classroom change out. It'll change out rather quickly over a period of a few minutes with a window wide open. And, so maybe you can periodically open a window and just change that air out. And that'll greatly, if you did have an infected person in the classroom, that'll provide a great degree of safety by getting rid of the air periodically and lessening the exposure to other people. So yes, fair point that what we've reported to date is with windows closed. So that's the assumption that the windows are closed, but we know in practice that that's not the case, that the windows, some teachers are much tougher than others because we've noticed over these cold days when we're monitoring the classrooms remotely, we've noticed some classrooms get down into the 50s and other classrooms are not dipping down as much. And when we go into those classrooms, we get concerned. We think something might be wrong. We go in there, and the teacher has every single window wide open, and everyone seems to be okay, and that's great. But it's not really required to be quite that wide open. But there's nothing wrong with it as long as the students and staff can tolerate it. Anyway, when there's, as you know, there's just a ridiculous amount of information out there. It's pretty difficult to find really applicable information to our direct situation. There's been some studies overseas that have looked at putting HEPA filters in classrooms. In that study, it was an old building with no mechanical ventilation. So that's really, right away, that's not us. That would be like Briscoe, basically. Or even worse than Briscoe, because Briscoe actually had ventilation. It was actually, for a 1923 building, it really wasn't bad for its design. And it was obviously left a little bit to be desired in its maintenance history, but it actually had ventilation. So we're talking a building with no windows. That's the first major difference. They put 4 HEPA filters in each classroom that they tested, which is sort of one of my points, that what you can get commercially, you need quite a few of them. And they had great results, but that was with the windows closed. They showed that as soon as they opened the window for a minute. And what they did in that case there, what they were doing is they were measuring the particle levels in the air in the classroom, which is one of the things that you can measure. We're not really equipped, and very, very few places would be equipped to measure, coronavirus in the air. That's a much, I don't know that you can, I'm not sure the technology exists, but you can measure other things that allow you to approximate how fresh the air is or how effective your ventilation is. So in the study overseas, they were measuring particles in the air, and they showed, it was kind of an interesting graph, because opening the window for a minute made a dramatic increase in the particles. While that may sound bad, that just shows you how quickly opening the window has an impact on the classroom. So there's 2 ways where the study right away doesn't tell us what we want to know. I liken it to, if you put, my guess would be, the analogy I can give you, if you were to stand next to a stream, the water's running by you, and if you were to pull some of that water out and filter it and throw it back in the stream as it goes by you, have you really changed much? Because what's happening in our classrooms is we're pulling in a large amount of air from outside, and we're pulling it through the classroom, and we're exhausting it out the other side. So given that, that's where I was alluding to the fact that the size of the filters we would need to make a measurable difference. And again, the difference is, if you want to measure the difference, right now we need to be better than 0. We have 0 transmission in the classroom. So it's kind of hard to be better than 0. But we're looking forward, looking ahead. Maybe things get worse. Maybe it's too cold to leave windows open. So we're trying to say, what else can we do? I fear that, again, that what we would need in terms of ventilation, in terms of portable ventilation, would be very extreme in order to make a substantial difference in the classroom. It would be the filters that you can get commercially right now are fairly small. They're meant for much smaller spaces, so you need a number of them in each classroom, and or you would need something much more commercial, which has which does have a longer lead time and much greater power requirements, and they'd be really noisy. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into it. I was trying to give you some degree of comfort or some degree of understanding of what the current situation is, because that graph that's part of the memo, that each thermostat at the middle school has a built-in CO2 sensor. And one of the things we learned from all of the studies is that you can't measure for coronavirus, but you can measure CO2 levels relatively easily in a classroom. The instrumentation is not too expensive. And as it happens, every classroom at the middle school has a CO2 sensor built into it. So we can monitor that. We can pull trends of that and see how the CO2 levels respond over time. And it's not really, we're looking at the trend of that to see. We can see in the chart that I included that you can see the day start. We started at a baseline level. Background regular air has about 410 parts per million of CO2 in it. And the kids arrive, you can see right away the CO2 levels increase pretty quickly, because that's, now we've got kids in the room. But one of the things we know about CO2 is it would have to be thousands of parts per million in order to be dangerous to many thousands of parts per million in order to be dangerous. And the first thing that would happen is the kids would get groggy, and which is kind of what kids do anyway. But so I don't know how you would actually know. But so it's not something that's dangerous, but it's a good proxy that tells us how effective the ventilation is in the classroom. The reason we're tracking it here at the middle school is the way the classroom was originally designed is it's measuring the CO2 level. That tells us roughly how many people are in the room, and it is matching the airflow to the number of people in the room. For COVID, we're sort of ignoring that and just bringing in the maximum amount of airflow all the time. If you match the airflow to the number of people in the room, you're going to do a better job saving energy. Right now, that's not our concern. But what the graph does show you is it shows you the kids arrive, the staff arrives, and immediately there's a spike in the CO2 levels. They don't rise to a very high level. What the governing agencies, organizations, it's not a government agency, but ASHRAE, which is a standards agency for HVAC. What they tell us is you want to see background 410 plus about 750. So you'd like to see it less than that. So less than 1,100, 1,200 parts per million. And in our classrooms here, you can see that we don't quite get to 800. So it's very good levels, very much lower. They say that once you get to 12, you should start bringing in outside air. We're bringing in outside air right off the get-go, and you can see that. I don't know exactly how this classroom operates, but clearly they take a break within an hour, and the levels plummet. Then they come back in the room, they increase again, and that repeats until the end of the day. And if you didn't know anything about this, you could tell. If you didn't know what day of the week this was happening, you can actually tell that the next day is a Wednesday, because this classroom has no kids in it on that day, and the only person in there is the teacher. So the levels the next day don't do this spiking pattern. They just slowly increase as the teacher comes in and does their thing. So it's interesting that it just tells us that we can learn a little bit. And again, as I point out in the memo, why is that important? Why am I talking about the middle school when you asked about the elementary schools? Because the number of air changes per hour in the middle school are similar. They're actually a little bit lower than the elementary schools. Again, windows closed. The windows in the middle school do open. So I'm just trying to give something that we do know, which is we do know what the CO2 levels are in the middle school classrooms. And given the air changes per hour are close enough to an elementary school, this tells you how quickly and how effectively good ventilation can change the air in a classroom so that CO2 level rises and then immediately plummets when the kids leave. And it never gets very high. So that tells you that we have very effective ventilation, and the air in that room is completely changed out in a very short amount of time.
All right, Mr. Collins, may I interrupt you again and ask another question?
Yes.
So the CO2 measures are built in at the middle school, but not at our elementaries?
Yeah, it's something that the combination sensors, to not be too geeky about it, we don't have such a thing as a thermostat in our classrooms. We call them sensors, right? Because that's what they really are doing. So there's a combination sensor that can measure a number of different things, and the middle school is just new enough that those are incorporated into the building so that it gives us feedback.
Okay, so I wonder, I appreciate the fact that you think that they're similar, and so we can use a middle school reading and kind of extrapolate that into what we would expect in the elementary school. I do wonder, though, even with this chart and these numbers being incredibly, respectable and lower than what we would ever begin to be worried about, I wonder if the numbers would be different in our elementary schools, because in the middle school, we only have half the children, right? We are in two different cohorts, whereas in our elementary school, we have the entire classroom in there all at the same time.
I think the number of students in the classroom is similar, though. The elementary schools.
Yep. It's 12 in the middle school and 15 in the elementary.
Fantastic. Thank you. I just want to ask that question, make sure that, anybody, and I'm sure there's just tons of people watching from home right now, that they understand that, right? So we're comparing a little bit of an apple to a little bit of an orange, but I'm just trying to set the guide for how close those two fruits are actually to each other.
Yep, I appreciate it. And again, I'm just trying to tell you what I know, and this is this is the best information we have at this time, and I think it's decent information. And I'm just, it's something that I had looked into on my own, and I thought I'd share with you.
Mr. Collins, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is that appropriate? You want me to hold my question?
No.
I apologize if this is obvious or if you've already stated it, because I'm taking notes. Are these readings with masks on or masks off? And does that make a difference with the CO2 output in the readings?
They're everything. Like you can safely assume that everybody 100% of the time has a mask on in the schools, which is good. So this is a recent reading. This is taken from a few weeks ago, and CO2 is not affected by a mask, and there's no way to remove it with a filter.
Well, they have the mask on with the exception of like indoor snack, right, right, Dr. Turocek?
They're at the middle school, they would not have had an indoor snack.
Right, but that's different at the elementary school, right? So mask off indoors.
The elementary schools are only having snacks in break rooms that are set up for snacks. So they're not snacking in their classrooms. They're going outside for snack breaks.
Not all the time. That's not what my kids are experiencing. Like my son didn't, just for example, my son didn't have snack the other day because he didn't feel comfortable taking his mask off because it was indoor snack. So just as an example, I'm just trying to understand.
So I think in the rooms that are having an indoor snack, there's only a few kids taking masks off at a time. But again, I don't think that would impact that. They don't all take their masks off unless they go to a room where they're 6 foot distanced. I can assure you of that. So.
And again, if you were to take off masks for snack time, I should just suggest that the teacher open a window. And they would have
windows open at snack time too. But
you'll be very similar to being outdoors.
Lindsay, I will follow up on that, but I would go with 98% confidence that they're not taking masks off if they're not 6 foot distance. So they have either got groupings where I know at some schools they have color groups and you get your snack break in the pink group, and those desks are much further away from each other. So I can explain that offline to you too, but, and I will double check again on that. But there are at the middle school, they're never taking their masks off inside unless they're in the cafeteria seated at a table where they're having their mask break. And the mask breaks, as far as I know and understand, are taking place outside or in a room that's set up with that minimum 6 foot distancing. So I can assure you of that.
So I think, we're set up well this year. So getting back to the real question at hand, I think the only way you said the part of the question was, have we done any testing other than reviewing what the current practice, again, things like this, CO2 level, we've done, measured airflow, things like that. We have not tested our own rooms for particle levels, which is, again, it's another proxy by which you can tell how effective any particular filtration method is. Doesn't tell you everything. So as I listed, if we want to do a test, and the bullet points I list there are just really quickly off the top of my head, some of the variables that would play a part in an experiment to see whether or not a HEPA filter or multiple HEPA filters could be effective at reducing virus levels. And really, the question I think that's most important is, would it be effective at reducing the spread of the virus between people? And the important part there is we currently have none. So it's kind of hard to get better than zero. Having said that, I understand the context of the question. What if it gets worse? So we're trying to understand that too. So there are so many variables because we can't measure the virus, but we can measure what's floating around in the air generally. And all of these things that I've listed here and many more play a role. And you have to control all of those things in order to get a repeatable result that's going to mean anything. Most of the studies, or all the studies that I've read so far, put a filter in a closed room and say, oh, look at that, it removed all the stuff in the air, or a lot of the stuff in the air. Well, of course it would. But we're living in a dynamic environment here. Like I said, the air, first and foremost, the air is moving through the classroom at quite a high rate. And then you interject people into the classroom. How many people are they moving? Are they standing? Is the door open? Is the door closed? How many windows are open? How much are they open? All those things I list there. All of these things have a significant impact. Maybe it's a rainy day and there's less stuff floating in the air because the humidity is higher. Maybe it's a really cold, dry day, so there's more stuff floating in the air. So it's going to be difficult to try to come up with a really conclusive answer as to would these be effective. I've talked with our outside HVAC engineers, and they've been trying to they've on a parallel path. They've been doing their own research, trying to look at different devices, and most of what they're looking at are more commercial. These are not your typical like Home Depot or Walmart sized HEPA filters. These are much larger, but can still operate on a classroom voltage. Some of them incorporate UVC into them. Some of these commercial ones, they're a lot more expensive, thousands of dollars per unit. They do make some noise. I don't know if it'll be objectionable. And there's a significant lead time to them. So they've been working on that. They've also teamed up with a scientist who is an expert in computational fluid dynamics, which is the field of how the airflow moves through the classroom. And I've asked them to work with me to develop a testing scheme where we can try to evaluate something and see if we can have an effect. And we're going to be probably using the particles in the air as a standard, and see if we can be effective at influencing those numbers. And as you can imagine, one of the complications is to have a proper experiment, you should have some dummy devices with no filters in them, and so that nobody knows which classrooms are part of the test and which ones are the placebos. So all those things you hear about in drug trials, they're also part of a scientific trial like this. So we're going to work together with our consultants to talk about what it would take to come up with any sort of a useful conclusion, because the studies we have access to right now are not exactly our situation, and we're not able to draw straight line conclusions from those. So we need to kind of, which is, I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a little bit surprising to me that there's not more information out there 9 months in. Not that there isn't information out there, but useful information, and useful in a way that even, I'm an engineer, and it's difficult to discern what is real and what's not. Not to get too sidetracked, but I keep coming across this one study that was in the press just before COVID, and talking about putting filters in classrooms in quote dramatic increase, resulted in a dramatic increase in test scores. And that got a lot of press. And I was like, wow, what a big deal. If all we did was put a HEPA filter in the classroom, kids' test scores are going to go up 20%. And that was widely reported in the press and re-quoted by a number of outlets, including HVAC suppliers. Well, I then read an article written by somebody who's an expert in statistics, and they looked at that same data and said, absolute, complete, and total rubbish. The conclusions, the author of the report never meant for it to be taken as a final conclusion. It was a draft paper that was released for peer review, basically, and the conclusions could not have been reached from the data that was collected. So it just shows you, you read things that, we have to assume that they're fully vetted and true, and they're not. So that's why I think we need a little bit of our own data to rely on. So our goal is to work with our consultants and this, and they're going to bring on, like I said, an expert in computational fluid dynamics to help us try to see, can we learn anything if we were to buy devices? Of course, there's some value into just putting filters in classrooms and people feel better about it, but it's a lot of money. It's not really responsible. And I don't want to do things that just make us feel better if there's no real scientific reason to do it. And especially if it's not effective. If we're going to do something, let's be effective. Let's know that we're being effective. And I think that currently, I think there's a lot of that, a lot of knee-jerk reactions that, well, it must be a good idea, so let's do it. And I'd like to think that we can be a little bit smarter about it. There's also the fact that, we are probably, weeks away from the vaccine being released. That doesn't mean that you or I are going to see that anytime soon. I recognize that, but it does perhaps mean that by the time we could get adequate numbers of the correct sizes of filters, two things are going to happen. It's probably going to be spring, and we're going to have windows open again more widely, and the vaccine will be available.
All right, so
I have a question.
Sorry, Mr. Collins, to interrupt. We do have some questions.
Sure.
I thought you were going to pause right there, so I apologize.
You should definitely interrupt, because I'll keep talking.
All right, Lindsay, I think your hand was up, and then if somebody else had their hand up, will you?
Yeah, I already asked a question. If you want to let Miss Robinson.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys, will you use your hand up in the chat? Like, all right. I can't see all of you, but go ahead,
I
Ms.
think
Robinson.
your chat is disabled, but.
I'm in the attendee panel. So on the attendee panel, there's a little raise your hand button. But go ahead,
Okay.
Ms. Robinson, please.
Okay, so I was just a few thoughts or questions. So have you spoken with other school districts that have used these filters? And if so, what are they buying? How much are they? And are they seeing any good outcomes in air quality?
I don't think anybody's really measuring, doing any widespread measuring of air quality. I did pay attention early on in the summer to some of the districts that released reports that were hundreds and hundreds of pages long. And I frankly wasn't all that impressed with what they were capturing for data and the standards they were using. It was, I think we've gone far beyond some of those communities. But I have seen some of our counterparts, not many, have bought some filters. In my opinion, they're way too small to make any difference. I think they're just window dressing, frankly.
Yeah. And would, other than raising our test score so much, would they be helpful after COVID? If we did have them, would there be any use for them afterward?
No, I think there's a couple of things about that study. It was basically not scientific fact that it raised the test scores. The sample size is much too small. Also, it was in California. Their air quality stinks compared to ours, you know?
Yeah.
On a good day, without half the state on fire, they have terrible air quality compared to ours in these locations where this study was done. So a lot of particulates in the air. We all remember as a kid what LA looked like. That's not what the whole state looks like. But in general, it is the air quality is much worse than ours. So we have excellent air quality. We have excellent filtration in general. For the normal, pollen, dust, that type of stuff. Our filters do a great job with that kind of thing. So no, I don't think there's also a significant cost involved because there's a lot of maintenance in owning a HEPA filter, especially right now. We like to leave the windows open. We want fresh air. Fresh air also, brings in stuff from outside. Next spring when we get back into pollen season, you all know your car turns yellow every day from the pollen that's in the air, and that's going to very, very rapidly clog HEPA filters. So I can't imagine us post-COVID trying to deal with thousands of HEPA filters all over these portable HEPA filters all over the school district. That doesn't seem practical. I would hope that we don't do that because we do have filtration in the classrooms, and I think we should rely on that. The built-in mechanical ventilation. Most of the studies out there assume that you don't have mechanical ventilation.
All right. Ms. Robinson, are you done with your series of questions?
I think I am. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lindsay, would you like to ask a question? And I'm gonna ask everybody to be mindful that we need to get through the disposing PPE and then run through. We have at least one thing we have to vote on the agenda, and we have a hard stop at 7:30 because we have a meeting of the whole on the same Zoom. So with that said, Ms. Lindsay.
I can be super quick. And if you already answered that, you can say, I already answered this, and I'll go back and look at our notes. So you referenced that you would have to get a commercial portable HEPA filter. What makes those commercial? Is it something about the HEPA filter, or is it the square footage of a room that it would work in? And what is the average size square footage of a classroom?
For the purposes of just roughing it, I call it 700 square feet for a classroom. Some are, we have every variety of classrooms, but that's that'll split the baby pretty well. The commercial ones are just much larger because if you I don't know if anyone has a HEPA filter in your home, but the clean air delivery rate, that CADR rating that you see on it, that's assuming it's, on its highest setting. And they're really loud when they're on their highest settings. even at the highest setting, it's at a fraction of what we would really need to deliver in a classroom setting. We would like to have, we'd like to see a much larger device running at a lower speed so it's quiet.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Collins on the HEPA filters? All right. Mr. Collins, do you want to speak to the PPE question before we move on to the rest of our meeting?
Sure. I mean, there is a pandemic. So the assumption that we operate under is that the world is contaminated, right? So from a custodial standpoint, they're being asked to touch all the things that nobody else wants to touch and nobody else is touching. You know, they're being asked on a daily basis to go where nobody wants to go. And the assumption that we have is those surfaces are contaminated. So we operate at a level that we're dealing with a contaminated environment. So when we have a case in a classroom or an office that we know about, a number of hours pass before we go in the room. At that point, all of the air in the room is changed out. That's the most important safety measure we have, because we know that it seems to be pretty well established that the path to catching the virus is through the air, not necessarily from surfaces. More and more reports are coming out now that saying that it's extremely unlikely that you're going to get COVID from touching a surface. So when we go into a classroom that we know that there's been some exposure, we know that the air is already changed out in that classroom several times. So we're just going in there to clean surfaces. The first several rooms that we did, I went in there myself with the custodians to just so I could say that I knew exactly what they were facing, and to try to set the standard for what we were expecting for a level of cleaning in those rooms. And so they're, at this point, they're going in with appropriate PPE. We don't get into Tyvek suits and, you know, full face respirators and things like that. It's just not really appropriate for the level of exposure. Even if there's somebody that we know has been COVID positive in that room, we're really in there to clean surfaces, and the air has already been cleaned. If we think we've had a more wide exposure, we might let it sit longer. And sometimes we bring in an outside firm to do some electrostatic spraying. We have our own electrostatic sprayers, so we'll deploy those as well. But at the end of that cleaning session, as we do with every surface every day, is we just throw our PPE in the trash, because that's the appropriate place for it. We don't segregate it out as medical waste or anything like that. All the trash cans have trash can liners in them, bags in them. So once they're in the trash can, they just when the custodian empties that, they don't reach into a trash can. They pull the liner out, they wrap it up. That goes into a bigger bag, so you're effectively double bagging everything. And that seems, you know, that's in line with the recommendations we've seen from EPA and CDC. And I feel like it's an appropriate level. Really, the thing is, like I said, we treat every surface as if it is contaminated, and try to maintain precautions that way. And again, the custodians being the tip of the spear here, they're going in and they're going into these spaces that have definitely had people that were positive in them, cleaning them effectively, turning them over, and not getting contagious, not getting themselves infected in the process. So it's proven to be an effective protocol so far.
All right. Any questions?
Thanks, Dr. Drochek. I was
picking up for you.
I was failing to unmute in a big way. Thank you. So yeah, what Dr. Drochek said. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Collins about the PPE? So just to review, the maintenance men don't put on any extra PPE, no like disposable gowns like we would see a nurse wearing, and therefore there's nothing extra to have to dispose of carefully.
Yeah, we're really, the name of the game for all of us is don't get exposed to aerosols. If you're an EMT intubating a patient, totally different ball game. We're going in there after we know the air is stabilized and we're cleaning surfaces.
Okay. All right. So if nobody has anything else for Mr. Collins, we're going to let him escape. And Dr. Chirocek, we're probably going to have to decide in between whether you want to go share your screen and go through that PowerPoint that you and Jean updated today, or whether we want to go to the budget review items, which include something that we do need to vote on. I don't know in the next 10 minutes if we have time to do both those things.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jean, would you like me to just go quickly, like give a 1-minute overview and then get right to that last slide so you can take it away on the expenses? Is that the thing that needs?
We do not have anything to be voted on. It doesn't have any transfers or any gifts to schools. So
Right.
It's review.
Okay. So, Ms. Visnick, if you want me to share my screen, I'll grab it real quick and put the slideshow up. And I'll walk us through pretty quickly. So is that up for everybody now? You can see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go very quickly through. I know we have a very short amount of time. The things that Jean wanted us to cover were unemployment. We're just going to give a quick nod to that. I think many of you have already heard that in what's going on in the news. We're going to talk a little bit about revenues that Jean is watching very closely. It's a review of the quick slide that I did at the committee of the whole meeting regarding just where we are in the budget process, and then on to the financial reports. So please, I want you to admire Jean's word splash. She did a really good job on that. It's a $, get it? See, isn't that cool? All right, sorry. So unemployment fraud, we just wanted to share with everybody here today that Beverly is not immune to what's going on across the state around the sort of bot blast where people have been invaded with unemployment fraud. We've heard from the MMA, which is the Mass Municipal Association, the MASS, which is the school superintendents, Jean heard from MASBO, which is the business officials, that, there's just a lot of unemployment fraud that's been occurring since March. We are sending out to our employees just some information on how to combat that if in fact they are, as I was, a victim of someone claiming, and I am not unemployed, I don't think, unless I'm going to learn later in the meeting. No, I'm only kidding. The unemployment fraud that's going on. So we, as Jean has sort of done a lot of research on this, she and John working together have brought the assistance of Christina DeCourcy and Deb Tina. There have been so many claims that we brought Christina DeCourcy, who's one of our employees that helps with attendance, on to help us. We're working really, really hard to contest all of the cases that are coming up and make sure. So it's sort of two-step process. First, you protest them that they're not, and then after they're invoiced, you have to contest them. And so Jean has been attending hearings and working through this. It's been a real nuisance for a lot of municipalities around. I guess she mostly wanted everyone to know, first of all, it's not a Beverly issue. It's certainly a Massachusetts issue. We have had in Beverly 348 unemployment claims in 7 months, which is just super a high number. The invoices from March to September came in at 166,954. School-related employees, and those invoices were 160. And of those, we know that 59% were fraudulent in the amount of 94,418. That's Jean's low estimate. She believes that it might even crawl up, that we'll find more that were fraudulent. But we are peeling through each and every claim and kind of pushing back. We're asking employees to join in this because there's a step that we can take as employees to report and say, yes, no, in fact, I am employed and that is a fraudulent claim. It speeds the process up. So John and Jean are working on a communication out to employees in the next couple of days. Jean, did I get it all?
Yes.
Okay. Revenues, these are just some accounts that Jean, she always comes forth and tells you which ones she has that she's keeping her eye on. This isn't news, I don't think, to any of you. These are revenue in our revolving accounts that have been impacted by the continuing pandemic. The first one is transportation. As you know, we're not transporting as many students, and we're not transporting fee-based students hardly at all. And so the revenues are deeply reduced, and we do use that revolving account to pay some transportation salaries. So we're watching that closely. Jean's working on making sure that we're finding alternate resources to make sure that we stay on top of that. Athletics, again, the revenues are reduced because the sports seasons have shifted around. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in our regular committee meeting. But the revenues in collections are off. Some sports, as we all know, have larger participation and even higher fees. We also voted to not charge for middle school as we went to intramurals for our cross country and field hockey. So she's just keeping an eye on that. Building rentals, because we're not renting the schools to outside renters, and we know that the Y counts are lower, and the contract that we have with them is based on their enrollment. That's going to result in less revenue. Again, we utilize some of our building rental money to pay some of our custodial salaries. So Jean has been working to identify sources, as well as we did have some monies from revolving that we carried over that will help with that. Same thing with elementary music. We're not running the after school program, so we're not collecting fees there. And Jean made a correction on that one as well to find the funding that we knew we weren't going to have. We knew that early on that we weren't going to have that money. And so we've made that correction, and she's working on that. Jean?
Yes, you nailed that one.
All right. Any questions, anybody? Okay, this is just a quick snapshot of the where we are in the budget process. As you know, our FY21 budget was based on an assumption of level funding of Chapter 70 at $9,257,567. When the revised governor's budget came out, it was at $10,125,430. It has now moved through the process with the Senate and House Ways and Means joint agreement. Again, it maintained that $10,125,430. So it looks as though if we're still awaiting the final vote from the House and Senate, but that we would be getting an increase in Chapter 70 from what we had in our assumption at the budget time of $867,963. So again, we're waiting for that final vote. The money would then come to the city. The mayor would need to make a recommendation to the city council, who would then make an appropriation to the schools. And that's how we would receive that money that comes in from Chapter 70.
Perfect.
Okay. And then the final thing, Jean, as always, has supplied you in your documentation that accompanied your packet with a sheet on the revenues. A quick review of the revenues can show you what we have forecasted versus what we anticipate to be in munis and what has been collected. So I don't know if there are any questions on that, or if there are any lines that jumped out at anyone, or anything that anyone had any questions about, which I will defer to Jean.
Thank you. If Lorinda can throw up the revenue report, I might be able to go over that before our time is up.
I think our time is close to up.
It is.
All right, can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we got like a 2-minute warning.
Mm-hmm.
Here we got a little bigger font for everybody.
Just a quick review of the revenue report is everything is coming in as we anticipate at this time. The key column is the second column, where we have to use money from the carryovers to be able to cover things. If you look under the building rentals, I've already used 170 that I was anticipating. I'm anticipating that number may go a little bit higher than that, because we're not taking in as many revenues as we had anticipated, because we haven't been able to rent outside, or the Y is not bringing in as much funds, because as Sue said, the RFP gives us a rate that we can charge them. And if their enrollment is down, it's a less number. So I'm just anticipating that number's going to go up. I just want to let the committee know that I was forecasted this in advance. So I did have monies in the revolving account. If I find that in, say, January, February timeframe that I'm not going to be able to handle that from the revolvings, then I would be meeting with the superintendent to see where can we, take from the appropriated budget, and we would still be able to sustain our expenses with our own money. I do not anticipate at this time that I would have to go to city council for any further appropriation.
All right.
I think that's about it. I want to say about revenues. As far as expenses, so since we are probably out of time, if anybody has any questions on expenses, feel free to send me an email at jsherburn@beverlyschools.org, and I can look at your specific, specific questions there. And my voice is saying it's done, Jean, so I'm going to mute.
I'm taking over for you.
That's perfect because we're pretty much out of time.
Yes.
I will put it out right now to members of this committee who are dialed in. So Ms. Coelho, Ms. Robinson, Mr. Manzo, Ms. Lindsay, by a show of hands, or if you want to inbox me or something, if you have any questions about if you're holding your head sideways reading the expenditure report, if you have any questions, or thank you, Ms. Robinson, for entertaining me that way, we can just do that via email. If you could send that along. I think in general, usually we like to think, oh, look, here's something that looks like we're spinning at too fast of a rate, or we're not spinning at a fast enough rate. And then, Jean tells us why. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the F&F meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Thank you, Ms. Coelho, I believe. All right, and we have to do our little roll call vote. Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Ms. Lindsay.
Yes.
Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Myself, yes. I don't think that we ever saw Mr. Silva. So Jenna, that vote passes 5-0. And for everybody that's joining the call, we're about to start our committee of the whole meeting. We're just finishing F&F. For the F&Fers who don't need to stay on for the committee of the whole or don't want to, again, members of the public, I thank you for your service. I thank you for dialing in, accommodating a remote meeting tonight versus our in-person meeting.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jean.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, Miss Abel, I'm going to stop sharing and then you can take over.
Thank you.
I'm happy to help you if you need. I could return the favor to you if need be.
Oh, that's your. There we go. So you can give people a moment to join. I think we have a quorum, so I will call this meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. Today is Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Welcome to the Beverly School Committee of the Whole. We are meeting remotely this evening using a remote meeting application that's provided at no cost to our district. We have BevCam broadcasting us tonight to allow for public access to the open portions of our meeting. And this is allowed under the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. The order specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks for our body to provide technical methods that allow for safe public access. We would encourage viewers to utilize the BevCam streaming options this evening, if possible. We are also continuing to try a captioning tool while a longer-term solution is created citywide, so bear with us. It doesn't get quite all the words captioned correctly. Tonight is Committee of the Whole, as I mentioned, which means we do not have an agenda item for addressing the body during the meeting, but we do always encourage our constituents to reach out to their representatives before or after these public meetings. Joining us tonight are the school committee members and various members of the district administration and leadership teams. I will conduct a roll call and attendance in a moment for the record, since the meeting application sometimes doesn't show all the participants, and we want to make sure that we can see and hear each other this evening. Do remember that any audio or video that you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record, and therefore we encourage you to use the mute functionality to prevent background noises. The chair will call on you to unmute when you are recognized. Okay, members, I'd first like to start with a roll call. I want to confirm that you can both hear and see us this evening. Mayor Michael Cahill?
Yes, hi.
Great. Ms. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Ms. Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. John Mulady? Is that a thumbs up? I'm sorry. I have you on two screens. We're not hearing you, Mr. Mulady. I saw you come off mute, but your mic is not picking you up. I'll let you. Oh, is that better? Still not hearing you, sir. We'll let you try to figure that out for a second. Ms. Visnick?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm Rachel Abel. We are joined this evening by Dr. Sue Chirocek, Dr. Dorothy Flaherty, Ms. Jean Sherburne, Dr. Andre Morgan.
Yes.
Great. Ms. Bethany Splansky.
Yes.
Great. Mr. Dana Krushank.
Yes.
Mr. Dan Keefe.
Yes.
Ms. June Casey.
Yes.
Okay. I think I saw Miss Julie Smith
Yes.
and Miss Betty Taylor.
Yes.
Oh, I caught some on the table.
Oops, Ms. Coelho, I think you're unmuted. And we have some citizen representatives like Miss Lindsay Ducharme, who's still with us. Okay, I think that's who I'm seeing. Mr. Mulady, did you want to try one more time?
I'm trying one more time.
That's it. That's it. That's the magic. Okay. Thank you very much. Since we are remote this evening, I will be calling for all actions to be done via a roll call vote. The chair will call that in alphabetical order, excepting the chair, who will go last. And we had anticipated entering into executive session at the end of our agenda. However, we will not be entertaining that after all. So without further ado, our first item is to actually recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could call on Miss Robinson. I hope the flag is showing. Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Okay, and Dr. Chirocek, first on our agenda is your reports this evening.
Yes. Could I ask if I could share the screen just so that I can keep my, and guess what? I'll do that in just a second. I don't have the right one open yet. Escape. Sorry about that. I had to shift from my last meeting to this meeting into a new PowerPoint. So I believe I am all set now. Is that working? Can you all see that now?
It's loading. There we go.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. So thank you. I have a few items tonight on the superintendent's report. The first one is going to be sort of a general overview of the equity audit that we are beginning to conduct within the district. I'm going to talk a little bit with some two other items, some advisories for family and staff around travel, and then some updates regarding some guidance from either DPH, the MIAA, and DESE, and any other updates that we have regarding our quarantine and safety measures. So I'm going to start first with the equity audit. I'm going to ask Dr. Morgan to join me. He and I have been working together as we, as you know, a very important aspect of our work this year is around equity, and we in keeping with that, we had hired Dr. Morgan as our Director of Opportunity, Access, and Equity. And one of the important tasks that we want to undertake together is the equity audit of the district. We think this is a really great step forward in terms of taking a look at where we are and what we're doing. So tonight we're going to share with you sort of an overview of the direction that we're going with this so that you will know sort of the areas of consideration that we're looking into. You'll learn a little bit more about our why we think this work is important. We're going to talk a little bit about the data and methods that we're going to use in the course of our equity audit. And then we're going to end with sort of a roadmap. So you'll see where we're going and what's to come next in the coming months. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Dr. Morgan to talk a little bit about the work that we've done in the beginning stages here, getting ready for this evening. And he's going to talk a little bit about incorporating some of the work that you all had done that brought us to this point.
Thank you, Dr. Chirocek. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, wonderful. As we consider the overarching goals of the equity audit, we thought it would be prudent to align the areas we are exploring with the resolutions that were passed by this school committee. While you may not see the first two areas outlined explicitly, we believe a focus on the 10 areas that we will review with you will all impact recruiting, hiring, and retention practices, creating a greater sense of belonging through the recognition of Juneteenth, and enable us as a district to shift our instructional practices such that we begin to fully embed equity in our curriculums. The purpose of this equity audit report is to assess the current strengths and challenges regarding opportunity, access, and equity for Beverly Public Schools, and then chart a course of improvement for the identified challenges moving forward. Dr. Chirocek.
Yes, so thank you. I think one of the things that we hope you find as we go through and share with you the areas that we are hoping to kind of hone in on as we go through this process is how they align with some of the key ideas that you had within those resolutions. So Dr. Morgan didn't mention, but the areas of consideration for now are listed in alphabetical order. But ironically, we believe that this first area of consideration, the degree to which the Beverly Public Schools right now is engaging in either accepting and or marginalizing student identities and voices is really probably our one of our top considerations. So we're really hoping that through this work, we identify sort of areas that we may have strengths in that we can capitalize on, and more importantly, any barriers or challenges that we have either in our own work perpetuated, any marginalization of students. So we want to make sure that we're looking at that we're taking a close look and identifying ways that we can address that. In our work, as you know, when we began this work, and even prior to Dr. Morgan coming, we talked a lot about what it was that we needed to do in this area, and we had identified in advertising for his position, someone that would direct our district and help us in the work that we need to do here in Beverly around the areas of opportunity, access, and equity. We spent a lot of time in the beginning here identifying what do we really mean by that. So what are the definitions of opportunity and access and equity? And so these are the sort of the definitions and the alignment with the terms that we're using. So opportunity, we're looking at as the methods by which we create opportunities to address socioeconomic status, English proficiency, familial situations, and other factors that contribute to or perpetuate low academic achievement. So that's one way that we're looking through that lens of opportunity. We're looking at access as the pathways by which we help each student gain exposure to opportunities for success. And finally, equity, which is really, in our minds, giving every student what they need to be successful. So we wanted to kind of define those terms with you and show you, and we hope you'll see as we go through how these align with those terms. A huge area of consideration is always achievement. We believe that as a school district, we are hopefully through our pathways through our schools, aligning students for positive outcomes as they graduate. And that would include looking at measures of academic achievement in both English language arts and math, looking particularly at all of our marginalized groups individually at English language learners. We believe that it includes taking a look at advanced placement enrollments, at graduation, a number of factors, and Dr. Morgan will express some of these further as we go along. But these are a particular look at the data, the hard data on some of these things, and what does that data mean to Beverly, and what does that mean to our students who are going through our schools? We believe another important data point to look at is the over or under representation in either discipline and suspensions for our student groups, both in middle school and high school. And the same goes for our over and under representation in our advanced coursework. So are we providing that access and opportunity throughout their career in the Beverly Public Schools for all of our student groups and our students of color in particular? Andre, do you want to?
All right. So research regarding remote learning and teaching shows that they are effective, but only if students have the necessary supports and if teachers have received targeted training and supports for remote instruction. We will examine representation in our remote learning academies because it's proven to understand what groups of students are over or underrepresented. It's also important for us to understand if remote learning creates opportunities, and if so, in what ways. Likewise, how does remote learning create inequities, and also in what ways? And more importantly, how might we address any adverse impacts so that we can do more than just meet student and teacher needs, but in order that we may rebuild stronger? We will also assess school culture and climate. How are we embedding equity resources in the curriculum from grades pre-K through 12? Today's schools comprise youths from a wide range of cultures and communities. And because all students deserve equitable opportunities for achievement, we understand how vital it is to strive to create culturally proficient learning environments that intentionally cultivate positive emotional and sociocultural development for diverse students. We certainly want to understand the types of supports that are necessary to address disparities in academic achievement and social emotional development among diverse student groups. Let's go to our next slide. We will also look at school and community relationships. We're interested in understanding how families of different races, ethnicities, and cultures perceive our school climates. And this area prompts us to listen to our families. How are different groups of families thinking and feeling about their school experiences? Do some parents and families view school as less welcoming and safe than others? Lastly, we will assess dropout rates. We will measure the district's progress against state achievement trends, asking, what do our district's graduation and dropout rates look like across race and ethnicity and socioeconomics? Are some cohorts of students more at risk or critical for math and English language arts performance based on the assessment data than other student groups? Data in this area can really spur dialogue about school and district level policies that may be giving some students greater access to resources than other students. Let's go to our next slide. This is our why. Why are we doing this? Well, we do want to build an understanding on how well the district is meeting its goals of opportunity, access, and equity. In turn, we believe that the information can really shed some light on where we can focus our efforts to mobilize support for each and every student's individual needs. Let's go to our next slide. The results outlined in this equity audit report will be compiled from quantitative and qualitative sources, both of which Dr. Chirocek and I believe are key in building an understanding of where we are and the direction that we should travel. You know, the strength of qualitative research is its ability to provide complex textual descriptions of how people's experiences are with a given issue. It provides information about the human side of an issue. So the three most common qualitative methods are what we're going to be using to gather data. and they include participant observation, in-depth interviews, and focus groups. Each method is particularly suited for obtaining a specific type of data. So for example, participant observation is appropriate for collecting data on naturally occurring behaviors in their original context. In-depth interviews are optimal for collecting data on individuals' personal histories, their perspectives, their experiences, particularly when sensitive topics are being explored. Then focus groups are effective in eliciting data on the cultural norms of a group, and in general, broad overviews of issues of concern to the cultural groups or subgroups that are represented. We're going to take this a step further and employ quantitative methods in our data gathering as well. Quantitative research is data-oriented, and so we're going to incorporate 3 methods. We're going to employ descriptive research, which aims to accurately and systematically describe a population, situation, or phenomenon. And in a sense, descriptive research really answers the what, where, when, and how questions. We're also going to employ correlational methods. Correlation between 2 entities and how one impacts the other, and what are the changes that we observe. And lastly, we will employ an experimental method, which is a method relying on a theory that's not yet been proven and is merely a supposition. Dr. Chirocek, will you lead us out with our plan to share results?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So I think what's been most interesting so far, even in the very beginning stages of this journey, is as we have been planning how we were going to do the equity audit and what information we were going to incorporate and what methods we were going to use. One of the things that we both agreed on is that a lot of this work is going to be iterative, because as we began some of our interviews with either leadership staff or some observations in classrooms, they always uncovered new areas for us to look at. So we're working really hard to kind of make sure that we're remaining flexible enough to incorporate the information that's important to Beverly, because I think that's really where our focus is. And so what we have come up with in terms of our roadmap for now is that we tonight are taking the opportunity to sort of present to you these areas of consideration and the explanations about what we mean by those and what we're going to be looking at. We plan to come forward in January to present you summaries and recommendations for focus areas for the first 5 areas, and then again in February for the summaries and recommendations for focus areas 6 through 10. I think what is most exciting about this, and I've taken part in equity audits of other districts, but I think the fact that we have Dr. Morgan here with us and that we're working actually in incorporating all of our internal people in the process, the data that we're going to collect is not just going to be data, but it's going to lead us, I think, to some really strong recommendations that are reasonable and that are pertinent and important to us in Beverly. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. You just got to listen to them for about 5 minutes. I've got to work with them for the last 3 months on this work. So as you can see, it's been a really exciting opportunity. So before we go on to any other thing, I just wanted to offer the opportunity for anyone to ask any questions that you have, or comments or feedback or anything as we go forward.
And I may have disabled the hand raising function. So do use your video monitor if you'd like to be called on by the chair. I'm trying to get everyone onto the screen here. I see Ms. Visnick's hand.
Really, I have gotten poor, my skills of unmuting have dropped tremendously in our couple of in-person meetings. I want to know if if either Dr. Morgan or Dr. Chirocek could speak to something Dr. Morgan said in the beginning about how we won't see in these areas of focus specifically anything about hiring, recruiting, hiring, or retaining a more diverse staff. So I wonder if you could maybe weave together for us how we can make that jump from what we did see to what we are hoping is going to be a very smart type of a goal.
So Dr. Chirocek, should I jump in?
Yes, I told you I told you this one would come up. So I'm glad that we had that opportunity to talk beforehand.
She did not pay me to ask that question.
Not a problem. I'm going to answer from 2 perspectives. Firstly, we believe that by responding to these 10 specific areas, it will automatically correlate to more impactful recruiting and hiring practices. I think if I can be a little more transparent in that regard, if we're looking at creating a more diverse staffing model, if you will, one of the considerations is that we have to have a mechanism in place or a structure in place that attracts people of difference to the community. I think secondly, it's also incumbent upon us to have structures in place that will retain people of difference in the community. And that begins to occur when we're addressing all of the 10 areas that create a sense of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so as I've connected with people of difference across the span of my career, many of the things that we talked about in the areas are things that educators of difference look for when they're joining a community. I think the last piece of this is that the district has to be intentional in recruiting staff of difference. And that means partnerships with higher education organizations with a particular lens around diversity and belonging perspectives. And so we're on the fence in terms of whether it was best to include it as a focus area, but as we explored each of the 10 areas in detail, we recognize that if we address those areas, then it will also address the first area of more diverse recruiting and HR practices.
Fantastic, thank you.
I don't think I see any other hands. Thank you, Dr. Morgan, Dr. Jurczyk.
All right, thank you. We look forward to coming back to you in January with some more information and to keep our work going forward. So thank you. All right, I have to go back to. All right, so I just have a couple of other items as we go forward, a couple things to address just in our final ending of my report here. So the first thing that I want to do is just, and really this is a reminder and a review, a reminder for all families and staff that the travel order number 45 that the governor implemented on August 1st is in play and very important. It's been a very, I think, challenging week for all of us as we look forward to how we will either abandon some of our traditional holiday celebrations for Thanksgiving, thinking about some of the travel that we may have had planned and had to cancel. But I just wanted to make a reminder and remind everybody what the advisory for families and staff are for the Beverly schools in terms of travel. First of all, if you are there are currently 2 lower risk states, Vermont and Hawaii. Other than that, all of the states right now are not listed on the low risk as low risk states. And the travel order specifically says that if you travel to a state that is not a low risk state, then you must quarantine for 14 days upon returning to Massachusetts, unless you can produce a negative test result from a DPH approved test. When we say that, we mean the PCR test. And in the Beverly schools, we look at it in 2 ways. For students and families, it's within 72 hours after your return to Massachusetts. That is in line with the guidelines that the governor issued. And for our staff, it is 72 hours after return, and that is in line with the City of Beverly's employee guidelines. So, and then finally, if you met one of the limited circumstance specific exemptions, and those range from dropping a student or picking a student up in college or traveling over the border for, medical care or groceries or something like that. So I just want to reiterate that to everyone and remind everyone that, and I think anyone that has spoken to us in the last few days understands that, we're grateful to our families for, being vigilant in their work and for their reporting to us if they are traveling. We have sent home reminders. The principals have sent them home as well as myself. If you are traveling, please let your school know so that the principals and the teachers can be aware that you may be quarantining when you return, waiting for results of your testing, and have some opportunity to provide you with either the makeup work or connect you with your work throughout that time. I wanted to provide updated DPH quarantine guidance. This is something that that June and Teresa and I had a very current meeting about the new guidance. So the original guidance that came out around quarantining was that if you had an exposure or if you had symptoms if you were showing signs of symptoms, that you would need to get tested. This quarantine guidance is for those who are close contacts. If you are identified as a close contact, you will need to quarantine for 14 days. You'll be asked to get a test, preferably a PCR test. But even if the test is negative, you have to remain in quarantine. What has changed, I have underlined in this slide. The original guidance, if you choose not to be tested, you would still need to remain for at least 14 days from the date of last exposure, or at least 10 days, provided all of the following are satisfied. So if you have not had and do not have any symptoms, if you are tested on day 8 of your quarantine period using a molecular diagnostic test, again, that's the PCR test to detect any presence of the virus. If you receive a negative test result and then continue to monitor your symptoms for the full 14 days, you can return on day 11. So you can come out of quarantine after that 10th day. I know June Cases is on the line. June, if I haven't covered it all, please feel free to jump in and let me know.
No, I think you've made that very clear. And even at its best, it is not clear. So we wanted to make sure that all of this is put in writing. And, we do our best each day to explain this to staff and parents as each case comes up. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, June. Does anybody have any questions before I move on while June is still on the line?
Again, the hand raising function is disabled this evening, so just put your hand in front of your screen. I'm not seeing any questions in this case.
All right. So then finally, I have an update and it's not a huge update, but just some information to share on winter sports. I know a lot of people have been waiting to hear what was going to happen with winter sports. This is recent MIAA and DESE guidance that we have received. The Board of Directors voted to approve sports-specific modifications for the winter season. That's the same process they went through for fall sports. The highlights of the guidance and of their votes, basically, the winter season will have a new start date of December 14th, 2020. And the modifications for the sports of wrestling, indoor track, winter cheer, or dance were not created and presented because the recommendation for those sports were to move them to a different sport season. So indoor track is moved to fall 2 season and wrestling is moved to the spring season. I do know that in terms of the indoor track, some of the reasoning was that many of the meets are held at the Reggie Lewis Center with multiple schools at one time. Indoor track as a sport is really conducted with a large number of members. So a minimum of 33 per school. And when you have 2 schools competing, that's 66, which makes the numbers really high. So I think they're moving it to the fall 2 season. I don't know this for a fact, but I think some of the thinking is that perhaps the meets could be outside. I'm not sure. And wrestling is moved to the spring season. Again, I think also thinking about some of the ideas about where that could be located and what that would be done. The sort of just as a reminder, it's the December 14th start. The original start of the winter season was typically Monday, November 3rd. So you can see that pushing it back 2 weeks. I think some of the thinking on that was to come back from the Thanksgiving break and make sure that things were all, sort of settled in before we started in on the sports season. And then finally, the NEC, and Dan Keefe is also on the line if we have any specific questions for him. But the NEC has decided to begin games and competitions on Monday, January 11th. And they also will continue with their in-conference games only. That's a practice that they used in the fall season. So again, I know that Dan is on the line. If anyone has any specific questions, he will be working with our coaches. If you remember correctly, each sport gets their own 10 to 12 page guidance on what particular modifications are made to their individual sports. Some things as small as the 6-foot distancing for mask breaks and water breaks, and others as significant as reduction of the roster size. So I believe, for example, I think hockey goes from 22 to 20 on the roster. So those kinds of modifications he will be reviewing with each of the coaches, and we will be making sure that, Beverly is obviously in compliance with whatever modifications and rules have to take place. So I don't know if anybody has any particular questions that they have, or any.
I see Mayor Cahill first and then Ms. Visnick.
Thanks, Madam President. Could we get a list of those sports that are at present approved by MIA for start in winter?
Yeah, Dan, do you want to take that one?
Sure, we'll be playing basketball, hockey, gymnastics, and swimming.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ms.
Thanks. Dr. Turacek, can you please scoot back a slide?
I can try.
Moonwalk, let's go.
No, hold on. I'm not sure I can. Hold on a second.
Awesome, thank you. So on this slide, you say 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sports did not have modifications presented because they would be moved, but then you only named 2.
Oh, well, yes, thank you. I only named them because we don't have any winter cheering or dance. So I believe
great.
The winter cheer, and I don't know what seasons I actually stopped paying attention when I realized we didn't have them. Sorry. Dan, do you know when those 2 sports were
No,
moved
that's
to?
okay. If we don't have them, it doesn't matter. I didn't realize we didn't have those. So
yeah.
I just was,
We have fall cheer, and fall cheering is, I believe, in the fall 2 season, but we do not have dance. Am I correct, Dan?
Correct.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right.
I don't see any more hands. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Keefe.
I also just wanted to point out that we have been keeping our updates on the Beverly Schools website, and I kind of wanted to just share with everyone that we have added. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to put. That we have added. I can't make myself get to that. Yes, I can. There we go. Can you see that? Am I sharing? Which tab are you looking at? The website?
Yeah, the website's just loaded.
Okay, super.
Madam President, could I ask one more quick question? Whoops. You there?
For Mr. Keefe?
Yes. Just, can you hear me okay? Because I just messed up my computer monitor. Just a quick question. The sport-specific guidelines for those sports that are being approved for winter, where can we find those and give a read through? Are they on the MIA website?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Good enough. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. And you'll find them right in a row, so you can look at each individual sport, and they'll give you all of the specifics. So, I guess I just wanted to finally share that this update is on our website here for updates of the things that people would need. We've tried to keep up to date, making sure that the resources are available for our families. One of the things I spoke about at our last school committee meeting was the feedback we were getting from families that they were getting inundated with communications, and they were less clear as to which communications were for what, and when they should, understand when they get a communication. So we've done a couple of things. First, we have posted on the website right here a copy of the not close contact letter. That's that general letter that was being sent out, and people were getting 5 and 6 of them because every time we had anyone identified with a positive case, we were sending it out to the whole school community. So we've kind of pulled back on that a little. That letter is available on the website. We will be sending contact information to only those students in the cohort rather than sending it out to the whole school at one time. And we will always be allowing sending notification for anyone who has a positive case within their classroom. Whether you're a close contact or not, you'll hear from us. But I would remind you that if you are a close contact, you will hear directly from our nursing staff or from the public health. So that the identification of someone as a close contact will come directly from either our school nurse or from the Board of Health. Otherwise, you'll be receiving an information that's similar to this. And so there's always a place that you can come and reference it. We also have created a dashboard. So we had some people ask information about how can we keep track? How do we know? It seems like there's a million cases. I keep getting letters. So we thought it would be helpful in June, put together this dashboard here so that people can kind of have a general idea of where cases have been or where there are active cases. By active cases, we mean that anybody that has had a positive case in the last, in that reporting period, correct, June? Right. So here is a copy of sort of just a dashboard where we're tracking. You can even see from our last meeting, I think at our last meeting, I was at 48, and there have been 3 more cases that were identified since our last meeting last week. You can also see sort of where they are and what they were. So we've had all of these cases here that are outside of the reporting zone, outside of the area. And I think what I mostly want to point out on this dashboard is even with the 51 active cases that we have identified as associated with the Beverly Public Schools, we have not had a single incident of in-school transmission. So I think that's really important for everyone to understand the safety measures that we're taking, the protocols that we have in place, the cleaning that was described by Mike Collins in our earlier finance and facilities meeting, all of those things, the efforts, and I can't stress enough, the efforts of our leadership, of our teachers who every day are in there doing their very best to make sure that things are going well, and of our families in not sending students to school when they're symptomatic, and our students for complying with their mask wearing and following all the protocols that we have in place. That really has been what has kept it going. We will update, June will update this dashboard on Tuesdays and Fridays. So everyone, one thing I would like to tell you is it will be hard to align this dashboard to either the DESE or the local dashboards, because just keep in mind some of our staff members do not live in Beverly, so they would be reported differently. So it's a little tricky if you're going to try to line up a bunch of dashboards and have them all work. But these are cases that we are reporting, and this is during the reporting period. So I wanted to share that. What else was on the webpage? We have a link here for resources for safely returning to school. This is another website that's maintained by our nurses and our health department. On here, you'll find the district guidelines and protocols that we have, and as well as up-to-date guidance from DESE and the Department of Public Health. So you can just click on these links right here to find any of that information. And June keeps this page up to date for everyone whenever they need it. We have links to the City of Beverly updates if you'd like to catch up with anything that the mayor has sent out. So that link is here for families. And we have also posted right here the official out-of-state travel notifications that I alluded to earlier in the meeting. So we're trying to create a place for parents. And finally, there's this. This is about a 10-minute video that I had created previously that just sort of gives you the information that you might need and helps describe some of these. I think we've all been talking COVID for a long time. And for those of us like June and myself who do this every day, all day, we're very familiar with some of the language and some of the definitions. But for those of you at home that aren't doing this on a daily basis, this is a great place to come and just catch up on some of the information and how we're dealing with positive cases in schools. What is a close contact? You can find all that information in that loan. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I guess finally, my last conversation piece is that we talked at the last school committee meeting a little bit about what might we be doing, what might be thinking about for the holiday, and are we making any particular plans about going remote or not? I would just want to share with you, I have spent quite a bit of time working with leadership. I'm working closely with the union as well as with some of the daycare providers in Beverly before making that final decision. So we hope to have that information to you right when we return from the holidays. And I will keep you all updated, and I'll be in touch with each of you to kind of give you an idea of where we sit. So hopefully by maybe Wednesday at Curriculum and Instruction, we might have some more specific information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Visnick has her hand up.
Ms. Visnick, do you have your hand up? Okay, thank you for putting it back up again. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Churchick, I was wondering, and if Mr. Keefe is still on the call, if any of the cases that have been reported were attributed to any of our sports, or if we could speak to, in general, how sports handled their seasons and the cases that happened, maybe not at our own school, but at other schools. I know there was a decent amount of concern, right, when we voted to allow sports. And as we head into the winter season, I think that it would be, I think I know what my perspective is, having had a child who just participated in the fall season. But I think it would be helpful to other people who maybe have a child about to go into the winter season if they had kind of a summary report about how that went in the realm of sports, as opposed to the report you just showed us about the classrooms.
Yeah, thank you. I actually thank you, because I think I was remiss. I told you all how wonderful and awesome the teachers and all of the staff in the schools have been. Our coaching staff had a huge task presented to them, all of the Dan included, and everyone associated with athletics. The sports modifications, as the mayor asked, if you go look at them, there are quite a few of them. There's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of that. We do not have any evidence of transmission across any of our sports teams. However, I can tell you that there were a couple isolated cases, and we dealt with them in a very similar way that we actually reached out to the state, as did our surrounding communities. So, for example, if a student reported that they were tested positive following a participation in a match that was within the 48-hour period of time when they might have been considered, to be at risk of exposing others, we had a team that went remote. Those students stayed home from school, and we put them into that protocol in terms of that. I think June can speak a little bit more to that as to how that happened. One of the things that we are concerned about always would include transportation on the buses. We have a protocol on the buses, though, where there's a seating arrangement. We're able to follow that. So, we had isolated cases where we could track where exposure may have happened. I mean, that's the case with most of our cases. We can almost always, through investigation, figure out where an exposure took place. So that's why we're really confident when we say that we have not had in-school transmission. June, do you want to speak a little bit about the quarantine policy for the team when it happened?
Sure. So I think you described quite well the process of what we go through when we do find out there's a positive case on a team. In this particular case, it did involve another city, and we did call them to find out because we had not had that precedence in our district. So in addition to finding out how they conducted their quarantine, we also consulted our epidemiologists, who gave us some instruction. Since then, they have changed the quarantine guidelines a little bit, and for indoor versus outdoor sports, which we can, share and put on the website as well. But again, it's taken on a case by case. We go in. Again, we did not feel that there was any kind of transmission that was being or exposure from team member to team member. And so we treated it as we would have if there was a positive case in a classroom. We interviewed the positive case to find out who they felt their close contacts would be, whether it be during the game, practice, or even outside. So that's pretty much, our routine actions of how we compile our lists. And then we share this with the Board of Health and assist them in conducting their investigation of the positive case.
I think that was great. Thanks, June. And I think it's really important, Ms. Visnick, in response to your question, we ran sports. We had girls soccer, boys soccer, girls field hockey, track, and golf that ran in the fall. And we really only had 2 isolated instances of maybe 3 isolated incidences of positive cases. And with all of them, we were able to kind of contain, and there was no transmission or any of that. So it went really well. Better than I anticipated. I think I had a little bit of trepidation going into the fall sports season, and as we all did about a lot of things, and just like the mask compliance that I worried about the entire month of August, it didn't come to fruition, and it was a really great opportunity. And I think our kids. Shout out to them for doing a great job and following the compliance as they had to. And we're really glad they had the opportunity to play. So I don't know if Dan Keefe has anything to add.
No, I mean, I think everybody really stepped up to the challenge. The parents, the student athletes, the coaches. I mean, I was out there every day, every game, every practice, and really they were unbelievably compliant with all the restrictions. And we were pretty fortunate compared to some of the other schools in the league because we took it real serious. Although everybody took it serious, but we really did our due diligence, and it was over. I mean, it wasn't the fall season that your typical high school athlete wanted, but it was a fall season, and they really appreciated it. And the parents really appreciated it too.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Trocheck.
I said, so that's what I have for superintendent report. So thank you very much. And let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Going back to our agenda. Looks like I'm up. As I mentioned in our regular school committee meeting last week, we have a number of dates on our calendars, starting with next week. The Financial Forecasting Subcommittee will be meeting on December 1st and 3rd. Our CISA will be meeting on Wednesday, December 2nd. We also have a number of negotiation subcommittee meetings upcoming, with food service on the 7th, our Unit A on the 8th, and our clerical tentatively scheduled for the 10th. We also intend to meet with transportation on the 14th. And then again, we'll have, just like tonight, a back-to-back finance and facilities and committee of the whole on the 16th. And as we'll discuss in just a moment, I'd like everyone to pencil in the 17th for a joint council meeting. So December 17th at 7 p.m. We will also figure out whether these will be hybrid or remote, depending on the number of participants. We may use the remote option. Okay. In our packets this weekend, we were provided a first draft of our norms and protocols, which is the result of our retreat of November 9th. I want to thank Ms. Visnick and Mr. Merlady for compiling with the sample protocols and all of our sticky notes this first draft. As with many of our resolutions, policies, and protocols, we will have the opportunity for a second reading at our December meeting. But I did want to open the floor, since open meeting is the place where we can discuss our opinions of these matters, to see if anyone had any initial comments or feedback for the rest of us to consider in this first reading. Looking for hands in front of the camera. I see Ms. Visnick's hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to try to just say to everyone, if you think your Post-it is not represented, by all means, kind of like bring that up. I don't know how comfortable people feel bringing that up. Maybe if you want to study it some more and bring it up at the next meeting, but I do believe that one way or another we managed to map each Post-it to some item in here, and so I think I have an idea of that mapping. We kind of tried to have our own little, like, if you think about A Beautiful Mind, there are a whole bunch of stickies, there are a whole bunch of lines. So there were a few that didn't make it, but I think that they were, between Mr. Mulady and I, we determined that they kind of didn't fit. So one of those, for instance, was Mr. Mulady's, one of Mr. Mulady's, and he said, yeah, it doesn't go here, based on one of the questions he had answered it, and then it didn't really fit into the norms and protocols. So I encourage everybody. I have all the Post-its. I kept them. I kind of categorized them in different Ziploc bags, and so I have everything that we can go back and reference them. So if there's any questions, really, please just ask.
Okay. Looking for any hands? We can pick this up at our next meeting. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the acceptance of a letter of resignation for the Ward 2 representative. And oops, that's really large. For this item, I wanted to just let the committee know that I had consulted quickly with our city solicitor, and I think the recommendation for this would be to have two motions this evening. The first motion is to recognize that the school committee had adopted a policy on June 13th, 2018, that was effective July 1st, 2018, which states that the resignation from school committee should be submitted in writing to the president of the school committee. In the opinion of the solicitor, the charter does not specify that we have our own policies. So what I would recommend is that we have a motion first to suspend our policy BBBC, which is entitled Resignations. And with that suspended, then we can have a motion to accept this letter of resignation for Ms. Ferretti.
So moved, Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. When we do suspend our policy, we do need a 2/3 majority, which would be 4. If there's any discussion, Ms. Visnick?
I just wonder if, for the record, if you have handy dandy the policy, the quote unquote number, which is really a letter that says that we can suspend any of our policies with a 2/3 vote.
I can give you that as well. I believe I can give you that. Suspension of policies is BGF. Would you like me to read it?
No, I just thought that, again, I'm sure for everyone who's riveted in front of their television or stream at home, for people to understand that all of our policies are subject to this, to BGF. We always have the ability to set aside a given policy, to suspend it and behave outside of the quote unquote normal operation of our policy. So I just thought it would be good to be thorough, to speak to that policy for half a second.
Okay. Any more discussion before we take a vote on suspending BBBC this evening? Okay. By roll call vote, Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Karen Robinson,
Yes.
John Malady,
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, we are presently suspending BBBC for our second motion. And the chair will make the second motion to accept the letter of resignation for Ms. Ferretti and to schedule a joint council meeting with the city council as prescribed by our charter. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Is there any discussion before we call the vote? I'm not seeing any hands. I'll just say we thank Ms. Ferretti for her service. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Karen Robinson,
Yes.
John Malady, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, okay, sorry. Lorinda Visnick
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. The motion is passed. Okay, I did check with the city council president and I appreciate each of you confirming your availability. It seems that Thursday, December 17th at 7 p.m. would be the ideal time to have a remote joint council meeting. We are investigating whether we can add one additional agenda item to benefit both the councils and the committee to that, but it will be relatively a short meeting. Looking at the charter, there isn't an exact prescribed process for basically obtaining the expressions of interest from candidates within Ward 2. But looking at other districts, we have agreed both with the city council's vacancy and the school committee that the process that we would like to use for the joint council is, as of today, make it publicly known that the committee will be accepting expressions of interest for the position. Those can be an email with cover letter, resume, or other presentation. We will ask that interested parties make sure you're a registered voter in the Ward 2 area of our city and submit those to the citizen concerns at beverlyschools.org website. Our executive secretary, Donna Bergeron, will be accepting all expressions of interest for the Ward 2 position and sharing those with the committee and the city clerk. So they will be included in the packet for the joint council meeting in advance. And the format for the actual joint council will have each of those who are interested present to the joint council for 3 minutes to express why they're interested in the position. And then we will be entertaining a motion from the table for a nomination. The way that will work is if the nomination is successful, that will be our new candidate. If it is not successful, that candidate will no longer be in consideration and the next nomination will be accepted. That seems to be the best way forward for this at this time and consistent with the city council's approach. Okay, so as chair, I will get this information and make sure it's publicly available with Ms. Bergeron to make sure that we cast a wide net for anyone who has an expression of interest. Also, we have received a number of expressions of interest already. We'll reach back out to those individuals to make sure they have this most recent information. Okay, no further questions. Looking for any hands. I see Ms. Robinson's hand. Thank you.
You said you would send out the information. Can you put in writing what you would send to us as well, like what the process, just because so we can understand it better and just go over it?
Sure. Yes, I've been playing tag with the city council president in the clerk's office today, so I have different pieces of information in various emails. I will compile it and make sure that it's clear, the process.
I appreciate that.
Sure. And Mayor Cahill?
Thanks, Madam President. Could I just ask you, did you just say that that you were recommending that if somebody is nominated and then doesn't get a sufficient number of votes, that they no longer be under consideration?
That's the way that North Adams has taken the approach.
Okay, I guess I'm going to say that I question the wisdom of that. I don't know in what setting the process needs to be kind of agreed on, probably that night is my guess. It's certainly conceivable that it may take us as a collective of city council and school committee more than one effort to get to a sufficient number of votes. And I don't know if that's a majority of 7 and 9 is 16. I don't know if that means 9 votes, but so
yeah.
I not to tell a needless story, but I do remember when I was a kid, there was a city councilor vacancy, and there was a long, drawn out effort among the remaining 8 who deadlocked 4-4 on a number of votes and eventually came to 5-3. But it may end up that a person who doesn't get initially a majority of votes may eventually that same person. So I just, I don't claim to know how it ought to go, except I'm just a little concerned with the way you characterized it initially.
Yeah. So I'm reading, from the prescription from North Adams. If the candidate does not receive a simple majority of votes from members of the convention, the motion fails and the candidate will be deemed ineligible for further consideration, and the chair will call for the next nomination. I can double check with City Council President Guanci again. Again, we were sort of going back and forth on this topic, but that's the prescribed process that was used in August of 2020.
Yeah, I mean, as I hear you read it aloud, it just doesn't sound like a very sound way of going about it. Just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Okay.
Question?
Yes, Ms. Bisnick.
I would like to pile on to the mayor's comment there. I also worry that it might take kind of more than one round. And so maybe there should be some kind of a elimination to say, okay, this person didn't get enough votes, but we want to keep them in the pool, versus this person didn't get enough votes and maybe they get eliminated, so that we make the pool smaller each time we go through. I don't know.
If we were to do that, we would need to organize a selection committee. It couldn't be done by a member of a whole to do a down selection process. That would be a separate process. And the city solicitor did provide me for guidance to public bodies responsible for selecting through a preliminary screening process. And that would require a series of open meetings that are published that then go into executive session, much like what we did with our superintendent hiring process.
All right. I withdraw my comment then.
Well, yeah, I mean, if this, I can go back to the president just to make sure that this last piece of the prescribed process is what Beverly intends to adopt. In fact, I will do that before I publish any information. I'll check with Ms. Kent one more time.
All right, I have a few other points. One is a question: when is the window of expressing interest going to close?
Thank you. I had a note for that, and I don't think I said it. December 14th, which is the Monday preceding the joint council meeting on Thursday the 17th, would allow for all candidates to be included in the packet. Okay. So December 14th, we'll say close of business.
Okay, and then I don't know, I don't know to whom this comment should go, but it seems, I'll use the word odd. It seems odd to me that the city council has a vote in us replacing our school committee member. And I believe that we're in the middle. We have convened a charter review commission. And so I wonder if this particular item could be taken up by the Charter Review Commission. Because, for instance, the school committee is not getting a say in who gets the Ward 6 city council seat. It just seems odd to me why the city council gets a say in who takes over the school committee seat. All right, so maybe somebody can help me figure out where we can submit that, because I would be very interested in the Charter Review Commission considering that question. And last but not least, do we need to make a motion to put BGF back in place, or is it implied that when we set it aside, we set it aside for a single vote only?
My intention was that BBC was set aside for this second motion. If there's anyone that feels differently and feels that we need to reinstate.
It seems to make sense that that's how it would work. We were setting it aside for that one instance. That makes sense.
Okay. On this topic, are there any more questions or comments? Okay. One final item is that the chair is accepting nominations for the position of secretary for our committee. Do we have any nominations? Ms. Coelho, I see your hand.
I would like to nominate Lorinda Visnick.
Okay. There's a nomination for Lorinda Visnick. Is there a second?
Does she want it to be seconded?
I think, Ms. Robinson, you didn't come off mute, but I think you made the second sign.
I did, in fact, make the second sign.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that, and I will say what I said at our January organizational meeting. I am prepared to serve and do what this committee needs me to do.
Well, then I just want to say thank you.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Shall we go ahead and take a roll call vote? I don't see any other hands for other nominations. So for the position of secretary for the balance of this term, we have Lorinda Visnick, and I will call the roll. Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Mulady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. Don't sound so enthusiastic, Ms. Visnick. Thank you so much for serving in that role yet again. With that, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we actually don't have a reason for executive session this evening, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. It's not debatable, so Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Mulady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
Rachel Abel, yes. A vote of 6-0. We are adjourned at 8:40 p.m. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Please enjoy your small little gathering at your home and be well until next week. We'll see you then.
Happy
Thank you, Rachel.
Happy Thanksgiving.
The recording has stopped.